Hi everyone, thanks for watching my factoring quadratics video. This is going to be one where we will have to pull out our GCF. So here is our first example. Okay, so we have 2x squared plus 2x minus 4. So when we're looking at this, is there anything that can go into our 2, and our negative 4? Yes, we can definitely pull out a 2, okay? This one has an x squared, this one has an x, and this one does not have anything. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pull out our 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we're left with x squared. Plus 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we're left with x. And negative 4 divided by 2 is going to be negative 2. So now we're at this point here. So we factored out this GCF right here. So now we're going to go ahead and factor our trinomial, this trinomial here. So we are going to go ahead and identify our A, B, and C. And so as we are seeing here, our A is going to be this one, which is going to be our imaginary 1. Our B is going to be this one, which is also our imaginary 1. And our C is here. So our A is 1, our B is 1, and our C is negative 2. So that brings us to step 2. So we're going to do our A times C, and it's very important to find our A times our C. Our A is 1 times our C is negative 2, and 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. So go ahead and identify your A times your C and identify your B, because that's going to go ahead and bring us to our next step. Our next step is finding two numbers that multiply to our A times C, which is negative 2, and two numbers, the same two numbers, that can give us our B, which is 1. All right, so let's go ahead and start by figuring out what our factors of 2 are. So I know that 1 times 2 gives us 2. And nothing else can multiply to give us 2. So let's see what we can do in order to make it work with our B. So we know that when we're multiplying these, one of them will have to be negative. So in determining which one is negative, we have to look at our B. Our B is going to be positive, which means our smaller number has to be negative. Okay? So 2 minus 1 would give us a positive 1. So that's why we're making this a negative 1, and we're leaving our 2. So negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, but negative 1 plus 2 would give us a positive 1. So remember that the importance of these two pieces of these numbers are going to be replacing our B. So now let's go ahead and get into our factor by grouping. So these two numbers are replacing our B. So we're going to take our A, which is x squared. And we're going to take these two and replace our B. And so we're going to say minus 1x. And we're going to say plus 2x. So minus 1x plus 2x. And then we have to keep our C. So we're going to say minus 2. Okay? With that in mind, we are going to go ahead and start grouping. So we've got this piece right here and this piece right here. So we're going to say x squared minus 1x and 2x minus 2. And let's go ahead and draw in our ladders. So is there anything that we can pull out that they have in common here? We can go ahead and pull out an x. X squared divided by x is going to leave us with an x. And negative 1x divided by x is going to leave us with a negative 1, because we didn't do anything to our 1, but we are canceling out our x's. Here, is there anything we can pull out here? We know they both have a 2, so we're going to go ahead and pull out that 2. They both don't have x's, so we're going to say 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we're going to leave our x. And negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So as we can see here, these two do match. So let's go ahead and start writing our final answer. So we have our x and our 2, so we're going to write down here x plus 2 times x minus 1, okay? Now, one thing we cannot forget is that original GCF that we pulled out right here. So we are going to be taking it and moving it all the way. That 2, we're putting it right here. So that 2 needs to be part of our answer right here because that was our original GCF. So we have our final answer right here. We can go ahead and look at one more example with this. I'm going to go ahead and erase my board, and we're going to go ahead and look at one more example. So for this example, we have negative 10x squared plus 5x plus 75, okay? So one thing that I do notice about this one is that there is a GCF. So let's go ahead and determine what our GCF is going to be that we are going to pull out of these 3 numbers, okay? So what number does negative 10, 5, and 75 have? It is going to be a 5. Now, another thing I do notice is that this one has a negative in front. I don't like negatives in front, so go ahead and pull that negative out. And that's going to change all of our signs as we divide, okay? These 2 have x's, but this one does not. That's why we're not pulling out an x. So negative 10 divided by negative 5 is going to be 2, and then x squared. 5 divided by negative 5 is going to be a negative 1, and then we're going to bring down our x. And 75 divided by negative 5 is going to be negative 15, okay? Now, we have nothing that we can pull out of this new trinomial. So let's go ahead and get into our factoring here. So the first thing we always do is we're going to write our A, B, and our C. So our A is going to be 2. Our B is going to be negative 1, you take the sign, and our C is going to be negative 15, okay? So now our next step is we have to do A times C. So A is 2 times C is negative 15, so 2 times negative 15 is going to be negative 30. That's really important. Go ahead and identify what your B is because these are going to be important as we go ahead and figure out that little puzzle piece. So we need to figure out 2 numbers that multiply to be A times C, which is negative 30. Let me scoot my camera over. And this is your A times C, and those same 2 numbers have to add together to give you your B, which is negative 1, okay? So let's go ahead and figure out our factors of 30. I'm going to scoot my camera over even more, okay? So, what 2 numbers can multiply to give us 30? 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 5 times 6. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Now, we know that they've got to multiply to be a negative number, so we know one of these is going to be negative. And we know if our B is a negative 1, then we are going to know that our bigger numbers are going to be negative, okay? Because the bigger numbers take the sign, okay? So 1 minus 30 is going to be, negative 29. That's not 1. So we can mark that one out. 2 minus 15 is going to be negative 13. That's not 1, so we're going to cross that out. 3 minus 10 equals negative 7. That's not 1. We're going to mark that out. And 5 minus 6 gives us negative 1. And here we go. We found our 2 numbers. So we know our 2 numbers that are going to be replacing our B are going to be 5 and negative 6. Okay? So 5 times negative 6 gives us negative 30, and 5 minus 6 gives us negative 1. So let's go ahead and get into our factor by grouping. And when we do that, we're going back to this equation right here. So we are going to keep our A, and we know we're going to keep our c. These two replace our b, okay? So we know we're going to have 2x squared, okay, plus 5x minus 6x, and then we have minus 15 from over here, minus 15. So now we're going to go ahead and group these four terms. So we have 2x squared plus 5x, and we have negative 6x minus 15. Go ahead and draw your ladders in. Now looking at this one, is there anything that we can pull out? We can definitely pull out an x because there's nothing in common between 2 and 5. So 2x squared divided by x is going to leave us with our 2 because we're not doing anything to it. And x squared divided by x is leaving us with an x. Plus, we're going to bring down our 5. We're doing nothing to it. And x divided by x cancels out. Okay? For this one, I see that I have a negative right here, so I know I'm going to want to pull out a negative something. Okay? Are there any numbers that can go into 6 and 15? 3, okay? This one has an x, this one does not, so we're not pulling any x's out. So negative 6 divided by negative 3 is a positive 2x, and negative 15 divided by negative 3 is going to be a positive 5, okay? So let's go ahead and get into our final answer. So we know that these two match, which is perfect. We're going to go ahead and take these two and combine them, and we're going to say x minus 3 times, and then we've got these two that are matching, 2x plus 5. Now, do not forget about our GCF that we pulled out up here. So make sure you are bringing this down, this negative 5, bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. Don't forget about it to our answer. So negative 5. And this is going to be your final answer.